Welcome to Coastal Conversations, the weekly podcast from Coastal Church, where we explore meaningful topics that shape our daily lives as followers of Christ. In Colossians 4:6, Paul encourages us to let our conversations be full of grace and seasoned with salt so that we can respond wisely to everyone. Through this podcast, we aim to live out that calling together. Thanks for tuning in. Well, welcome to today's show. We have such an interesting and wise, in my opinion, guest with us today. You are going to learn so much, and I know that you are going to be inspired for sure. Kevin Levy is a husband, a father of 2 young adult children, an active member of Coastal Church. He leads a men's small group almost every single semester. You're going to hear about that. It's almost a perpetual group. And currently, he is a professor at the University of Mobile and an adjunct professor at the University of West Florida. He is experienced as a director of intelligence, division commander, and a special agent, which you're going to hear all about today. Help me welcome to Coastal Conversations today, my friend, Kevin Levy.
Well, how are you? I'm honored to be here.
Hi, Kevin. Thanks for being here. I'm super excited and very honored that you agreed to do this because I know it's not always easy to go on and talk about your story and talk about your life and then what God's shown you, but I appreciate you being here.
I couldn't think of a better place to be at this time, so I'm glad to be here.
Well, as we get started, let people get to know you a little bit. Tell us how you came to know Jesus and maybe how your family found a home here at Coastal.
Yeah, so finding a home at Coastal, I'll start there first.
Okay, yeah.
Really, it was part of that journey, to be honest. And we had moved back here when I was in the government. Had moved around several times. And when we wound up back here, obviously, like most people, when they come to a community that are seeking a church, try to find different churches. And we didn't have to look too far. We were invited by some friends, really through some common kids friends.
Mm-hmm.
And once we found the children's ministry here, never looked back, never left, and never plan on leaving. So that's how we found church here, which we call our church home.
Yeah.
And as far as my individual walk, I kind of look at it as sort of having 2 phases of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And in the first phase of my life, I really see identifying with the history and the culture of what's written in the Bible. But it took a lifetime to really understand that you have to actually twist that around. And instead of sort of identifying with what's in the Bible, using the Bible to find your identity. And when you find your identity in Christ, then you really begin to walk and understand how all those other things sort of play into your daily picture. And that's really been my journey. It's been a phase of understanding, sort of the history of things, but also walking through seasons of question, asking a lot of questions. And when all of the answers point in one direction, it's a pretty easy decision and one that you should not run away from, in my opinion, and certainly one that I've embraced well and try to not only live my life by, but live my life through my belief and my following.
That's so good. Before we get into some of our topics today, in your former life, we all have different phases and seasons that we're going to talk about today in life. You and your wife were Secret Service agents, pretty high up, right? You were Secret Service agents for several presidents of the United States. I know that we could probably fill up our podcast with stories that you have about serving them and serving our country in that capacity. Share maybe a little bit with our audience and me, who always love those stories, maybe a little bit of what that experience was like. And then what as citizens should we know about these selfless men and women that put their lives on the line every day as Secret Service agents for our presidents?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying this, and I like to explain this to people when they ask about, what do you do or what's your career? A lot of people, first and foremost, they try to identify their lives by who they are at their job. And while that's important, I think it really has more to do with where do you see yourself in God's plan and where's your story driving you? And sometimes jobs start before you really understand your walk, and sometimes your walk starts before you find a job. But in all instances, I can say is honestly, as I sit here today, that many people search an entire lifetime for their dream job. And I've been blessed to have not only that dream job, but more than one. And so for me, it was one of the most exciting times of my life, one of the most exhilarating times of my life. It
exhausting
was
time.
There is a lot of travel. And like any good Secret Service agent, you work with current presidents and former presidents and foreign heads of state. And so the places you go, the things you see, the meetings that you're part of are absolutely amazing. The greatest day for me in the United States Secret Service, and I can say this now that I'm retired officially, had nothing to do with an assignment, but had to do with the fact that I crossed paths with my wife. And had I not done that on that day, who knows where I'd be. But obviously that was predetermined, pre-planned, and as unwise as I might have been in my younger years, I faithfully followed with what I felt like was where I needed to be. And I thank God every day for it, because she is one of the greatest blessings in my life. Yeah. Having said that, it's a great agency to work for. And, they've been in the news lately. Yeah. There's been some stories, and like any agency, the hardworking men and women who dedicate themselves to their work really have to transcend both good and bad seasons, and they have to work through that. And no matter what's happening outside publicly, on the inside, you still have to do your job. And there are things that happen at sort of the leadership level and politically that change the dynamic. And, if you're just somebody that goes to work to do your job because you love it, it's hard to watch and to hear that. And I'll tell you, they see it, they know it. There are many times I can remember sitting in an airport watching the TV screen that might be playing whatever news network's playing. And really the only purpose in me watching was to figure out where I was going next, because whatever you saw in the news really dictated what was happening, whether it was a natural disaster, whether it was something political, whether it was a country that was in conflict or a peace negotiation. And there are many instances I can think of, and there's many different stories. I remember, at least on one occasion, being at Camp David before I was supposed to get married, having a marriage date set, a wedding date set. And during the peace negotiations that were happening at the time there, they kept going on and on and on. And fortunately, they reached something like literally just a couple of days before. And the whole time I was there, I was like, well, do I just leave? Do I stay? I mean, is it a common excuse to tell them that you're getting married in a couple of days?
How does this work?
But, these are the types of great places that you get to go and you're a part of. And I think the most interesting thing, the biggest takeaway, the biggest learning curve for me was not doing that job, because I felt at home there. I felt natural there. Like that was where I felt called to be. Even
putting your life on the line for another human being. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I can just say as a Christ follower, giving your life to save someone else, I mean, that's a pretty good role model. It's already been laid out. So I feel like, I've been redeemed through that same process. Right. And so I feel like, that's part of the job. Yeah. And you don't shy away from that. I actually, and if you ask my wife, or probably even my children, certainly my close friends, they'll probably tell you sometimes when things are quiet and really still and there's not a lot of noise and everything's settled down, that's when I'm the least comfortable. Wow. But if you throw me into the middle of some chaos, like that's my comfort zone. But that's not really a healthy way to live, right? So so you don't want to seek those environments, but I found myself there on many occasions, and there are many quiet times in the middle of the chaos that you're sitting or standing sort of off the side, always behind the scenes, certainly always quiet, that you have a lot of time to reflect. And that was probably the biggest transition coming out of the service when I retired, was being able to talk. Not have a conversation, but being able to talk about what you see, what you feel, what you want to do, where you want to go. Because for so long, it's you say nothing, you just go. And I've been the fly on the wall in so many rooms in so many places, and as anybody on that job. And I feel like the respect goes for anybody that, even in this day and age, not just sort of despite of what's being said, but in spite of what's being said, still signs up for the calling. And if you haven't checked it out, I think it's on YouTube and a few other places, but they did it at the Super Bowl even. They released a really cool recruiting video ad. And honestly, like my own personal opinion when I saw that was like, the Secret Service is back. Wow. Like they're back where they need to be. They go back to their history. It's one of the oldest agencies. And unlike most any other law enforcement agency, not saying one's better than the other, but unlike almost every other agency, there's a core dual mission. And protection is always first and foremost.
That is awesome. So we need to be in prayer for these men and women that sign up and make that ultimate sacrifice there, and do that. That's a lot involved, Kevin.
There's a lot of hate there. Prayer is a great weapon for that, because there's a lot of hate. I mean, if you think about it, safety and protecting somebody who's a target, whether you like that person, you don't like that person, your opinion doesn't really matter in that situation. The job that you signed up for is to do that job. But there are people who spend 25 hours a day that doesn't exist, 8 days a week that doesn't exist, planning and plotting to cause harm to somebody, and you don't know when or where that is.
Wow.
So always being on guard, me even coming to church,
It was a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, used to sit in the back, now I sit in the front.
I know.
So all of those things, you just don't know where
Yeah.
the next loud noise is coming from. And so just training your body back into, well, wait a minute, I have to develop relationships. I have to be quiet sometimes. I can't always be preparing for something. Sometimes I have to just stop putting myself in the way, because God's plan is the preparation. And so I just have to walk faithfully through that door. And that's really how you have to sort of change your mindset.
That's so good, Kevin. The past few weeks, Pastor Chad has spoken about spiritual warfare, attacks, having discernment this last week, which was a great sermon, through all our seasons in life. You've actually experienced these attacks quite strongly throughout different phases and life experiences throughout your life. Can you tell us a little bit about that part of your story? And then what has God taught you through these difficult seasons in life?
Yeah, the lessons don't ever end, right?
Right.
And we use the word seasons, and I can speak to that even more specifically, because that really means something to me, at least how I internalize a lot of these conversations.
Yes.
And throughout my life, I've experienced things, and there's just some things that you see, and there's some things that you observe that are part of your past, and you try to put them away. But even when you do, and even though it's part of your past, and even though you don't have to sort of live in that moment, unfortunately, sometimes those things come back and you see them again, and you become part of them again. And I didn't really realize the significance of that until recently. I faced another a challenge, and in going through this challenge, it really pushed me very hard in just really wanting to know, imagine walking into the room and everybody's flipping on light switches, but still you find there's just a little bit of darkness, right? And the light chases all of that darkness away.
Yeah.
But the enemy shows up at the most inopportune times to show us that tiny little speck of darkness and almost take our focus there. And so you have to make a conscious decision. Are you going to focus on the darkness, or are you going to try and look at the light? And the people that are in the room flipping the light switch, is this my wife? Coworkers that she may have, or people that she knows, or friends of the family that may or may not even know what's going on, that send a kind word or a message, and you're like, that's it, that's what I needed to hear. And so retuning yourself to see not only what light is being turned on, but who's flipping the switch, and where they're coming from, and that they're trying to be part of your story, and letting them in, letting them to be part of that story, so that you're not just on your own sitting there. But I think the bigger lesson too is that things that might have existed in the past can later be triggered, even years later, be triggered by hardships that you face now, and understanding that that's a real potential, and how are you prepared to deal with that, and what is your solid rock that you're going to stand on in that moment. And it's funny how not only God shows up in your life, but God becomes the center of your life when you allow him to, but how it's almost orchestrated in such a way, right, divinely, because when you need him most, if he's not that rock, it's not impossible, but it's a lot harder to find that rock in the moment, right?
Yeah.
And so, I always tell people, climb when it's hardest. Find a couple of miracles every day, not just when you're looking for a miracle. And they can be small, tiny little miracles, because these reminders are sort of fortifying this thing that you have inside of you, so that you know where to turn. And obviously God's the biggest light, but that doesn't mean it's not easy to see darkness. And I feel like that, knowing that balance, and here's the healthy way out. So, when you find yourself in a season, and I'll just tell you this, like, I feel like I went through a season. I feel like everything that I had built for my entire, at least my adult life, was built on reputation, was built on integrity, and was built on past performance. Yeah. And when all of that gets called into question, what are you going to do? And so the first thing I figured out I needed to do, and this probably ticked off a bunch of people around who were like, fight.
Fight. Yeah.
I fought with grace.
Yeah.
And that wasn't because it wasn't because of my own strength, but it was because the people who were pouring into me were telling me, you know, to look at biblical scripture. And so when I wanted to fight, you know, people were telling me like, hey, but be still for a minute. And that comes straight from the Bible. And so I feel like that was, you know, really what set my focus straight. And then I kind of just woke up one day and I was like, I'm going to live in peace. And the ticket to that, the way to get onto the peace train
I want the peace train.
Yeah. So show grace and forgive. And I'll leave the mercy to God, because we're all accountable, and I'm accountable for me, and other people are accountable for them. And so I want to extend grace, and I extend forgiveness, and I show grace, and I have no ill will. That doesn't mean you have to invite people that cause you harm back into your life. That doesn't mean you have to have a business relationship with them or a personal relationship. It just means you call it for what it is. But as children of God, which they too are, you can show them that there's peace by at least internally forgiving and showing grace and extending grace, and not getting caught up in the drama just because it feels like it's a season to fight. Because I can tell you this, it's harder to show grace than it is to fight. And, you know, when it comes to strength, people question that. They're like, well, is this weak? Is this backing out? And I would challenge anybody, and I pray that nobody has to be in this situation. But I would challenge you that if you're in that situation, show grace after you fight and tell me which one's easier. Because showing somebody that's tried to hit you in the face,
Kevin, that's good. Yeah.
It's a lot harder. And the second thing I learned is I already know who I am, right? Yeah. And so people can call names. And I say this all the time. I'm a child of God. He knows me by my name, and no one else has the authority to rename me. So if you live your life that way, then day one, when I show grace and I enter into peace, I start to rebrand. And I rebuild my reputation. I rebuild it. Every person I meet, it's a new handshake. And I did it once, I'll do it again. And once you are satisfied that everything falls into place, I know it sounds ridiculous.
No, it's great. Yeah.
But it's so freeing. And,
it's so freeing.
And I can tell you, I'm in the greatest peace that I've ever been in. It didn't come without good counsel. Yeah. It didn't come without good conversation. It didn't come out without professional conversation. This is all a result of being supported by an amazing family, the support of your spouse, questionless, if that's such a thing, right? No question asked, like wherever you go, I go. And that's how my wife is, always has been, but is in this situation. My children, my family, anybody, my parent, anybody that's aware, my friends, my closest friends. And then realizing that, those that know you, and those that don't may never make an opportunity. But at the same time, I don't have to have 5,000 people walking in the circle. Those that know me. Yeah. And I know who they are. And, and I'll finish by saying this too. That begs the question of what's next and what kind of decisions do you make? And decisions after going through a terrible storm are so much easier when you realize one thing. People always seem to seek for which decision is going to bring me peace. I just want a decision to bring me peace. And I say this, and I feel confident when I say this, that no decision, right or wrong, will ever bring you peace. It'll just bring you a good decision or a bad decision. Only one decision brings you peace, and that's to trust in Christ Jesus. Because if you put that at the center of every decision that you make, right or wrong decision, you can always get back to the right. And so that's that literally all came in this one season. And I feel like when you focus on that movie that wants to replay itself because it gets triggered, the little ideas or things or places that you've been that used to haunt you, they go away so quickly. And all of those things become calm and peace. And it doesn't mean things don't upset you because we're still human.
No, yeah.
I just know that my regrounding is back to center, which is extreme peace. And I haven't been like that in a long time. And so I hate that season happened. But I am so thankful to God that I am where I am today.
That's so good, Kevin. So your book's coming out when? That is a book. That is godly wisdom. That's deep waters from a time spent in a battle.
So I will share this with you. So I write a lot, just different things, always writing on something, usually pieces of paper on the computer, maybe even an index card. I have a lot of writings, but I did start kind of putting some thoughts together into this idea, talking about seasons, because it occurred to me, and I'll just give you a couple of examples, that we walk through seasons that we encounter, but that we too can put ourselves in a season. Not that we are determining our path, but that we see our path and that we have to go through the steps to get there. And I'll give you a perfect example. I've been teaching a lot of classes for a long time. Everything lines up for good reasons, and really good high-end training and experience breeds the opportunity to train others. And I believe I'm passing that forward. And so I've done a lot of training. And there was a season a couple of years ago where I was like, I really felt it on my heart that I wanted to be a student too, right? You teach so much, and sometimes you want to be a student. And I was like, I wanted to find something that I could just be a student at. And there was a class that I had put in for, but COVID had come, and there was like a 2-year waiting list, and there was, thousands of people on this list from all over the country, even around the world potentially.
Wow.
And I was on the list somewhere. But I was riding in a car with a very good friend of mine who was a witness to this. So there's a documented witness to this episode. And I just looked up and I just told him, I said, I'm putting myself in a season of learning. And he knows how I operate. And he knows when he hears me say that, he's like, all right, this dude's about to go learn something.
Yeah.
Put myself in a season of learning. I don't know what that means yet, but I feel it in my heart I'm going to be a student somewhere. And we were riding back a few days later from the same trip. We were traveling out of town, and my phone rings. And I answered, and it was the lady who does the logistics for this class that I had put in for. And she said, hey, there's thousands of names on this list. We did a random lottery, and you're one of the names that got picked.
Wow.
You're in the class. It starts in a month if you can go. And I was like, first of all, I don't play games of chance, let alone win the lottery. So I'm like, I've never won anything like this in my life. I've got a wife, 2 beautiful children, faith in God. Like I felt like I've won everything I ever needed.
Right.
And but here I am, and I went there. And the craziest part about this is the part that just totally blew my mind. So I went there thinking I was a student, and on day 1 in this class, it's a 6-month long journey. And on day 1, they're nominating leaders in the class president, class vice president, right? And I'm like, who am I? It's a leader. And it was a command leadership course.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, if you don't raise your hand, if you do, and so everybody wanted to raise their hand. It's like going to political science and asking who wants to be president, right? Everybody wants to be.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, and we each went around and we kind of told them why we were there and who we were. And then we had to say one thing about ourselves. And so I talked about my faith. And the class coordinator, who was hired by the institute that puts on this training, said, we're going to do something that we've never done before. And there's nearly 100 classes iterations had gone on. So I was in class almost to 100, not quite. And he's like, we've always had a class president, a class vice president, a class treasurer, secretary, all the normal things. We've never had a class chaplain. And he said, I would like you to do it if you would do it. And never expected to do that. Had no formal training to be there. But I was in that class, and every morning before class, I got to pray over all the students in the classroom.
Wow.
Even had instructors who were attorneys and other things come in during for little segments of the class going, I don't know how you guys get away with this. And I'm like, well, until God tells me to stop, I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, here we are.
And I mean, what an opportunity. And for a couple years now, since I've been out of that class, I still send out devotionals to them in the morning. I get these thoughts not every day. I did every day in the class. Now, every so often, I'll write something, come to my heart, different conversations, and I send it out. I've been in contact with subsequent chaplains for those classes that have called in to find out what it is. And when you sign up for that, by the way, you don't know what you're going to expect. We had births. We had, unfortunately, had an officer that had gotten shot.
Oh, wow.
We had things happen. Like, what do you do when you're a class chaplain in these situations? I have no training for this.
Yeah.
And so, you just go and pray with people. It was an amazing experience. And I don't remember as much about what I learned in the class as I do remembering about praying over those students every morning in the class as a student in there. And so my season of learning that I put myself in was really driven by this thought that I had and this passion that God had landed on my heart. I had no idea what I was walking into.
Wow.
And that's why I say you can put yourself in a season to give opportunity for God to do some work. Because if you just sit and wait and you don't put in the effort to do it, like things may never come that way.
Yeah.
And so, know what the plan is and put yourself in an opportunity to be available for that plan.
Yes. Put yourself in a position of availability.
Yep.
Going back to what you said a little bit earlier about getting on the peace train and living a life of peace, which I like. When Chad and I were going through a difficult season, young in our marriage, we were under a leader that was it was just a very, very hard season. And the leadership that we were under was toxic and horrible and all the things. And I would get so frustrated and I would say, I just need people to know. If people just knew. And one day Chad stopped me and he goes, Jen, we got to want to be more like Jesus than we want justice.
Yeah.
We got to want to be more like Jesus than we want justice. And that's what I hear you saying in this situation. And then he reminded me the end of Paul's life. He goes through a hard season, and Paul says this: Alexander the coppersmith did me much evil. The Lord will repay him for what he's done. Like, it's like what you said. I'll leave the mercy and the judgment and the justice up to God.
We see too many dramas on TV where we think we got to have the case and trial right here and now.
Yeah.
And so we get into this mentality: if something happens, that we need immediate judgment, that we need immediate decision, that we need immediate remedy. And so we seek it. And I'm not saying to not protect yourself. I did. I mean, you do what you have to do to protect yourself.
Absolutely.
In a situation, because you have a family, you have things that you have to keep under control, right? Especially if you're trying to lead a household. But at the same time, to bring yourself to not wake up every morning or go to sleep at night wanting something bad to happen to somebody, like that's, and I'm not saying like physically, I'm just saying like that you don't, that you don't have a spiritual prayer for that person.
Right.
We've talked, and it's even been said in church here, but like praying for that same person that's causing you harm is very helpful. And it's a super hard thing. This is why I tell people like fighting is easier than going down this path. And I'll tell you, I chose every hard thing to do, not because I wanted the journey to be difficult, because I wanted peace. And you can't get peace, which is that
I chose every hard thing to do, not because I wanted it easier, because
I wanted peace. And peace wasn't going to come easy.
Yeah.
But peace can come in an instant because trusting in God is easy. And so like when you have faith, right?
Yes.
And so put your faith in front of it. And that's why I feel like to fight back is almost instinctive, right? Our body's been trained to punch when punched. You know, that's instinctive. Or to somebody says something to us, to say something back, and then we spend an eternity trying to take back words. It's like, be more thoughtful in the moment about whether or not what you're saying and doing is leading you towards peace or leading you towards drama, towards hurt, towards more anger. Is it helping you resolve the situation? And peace doesn't hurt, but sometimes it's hard to get there.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm at. And I'm so glad that I trusted in God in this whole situation and listened to those around me who were just saying, be still, because it's very easy to not only hear noise, but to make your own noise.
Yeah. Yeah. And that goes so much in hand with what we're learning about Nehemiah too. Nehemiah, when his naysayers came, he was like, I don't have time for all of that. He could have fought back. Like, he could have fought back with words and come back at them. But he was like, I don't have time for that. I'm building something. I'm doing something. I'm working for God. And many times that's just what the enemy wants to do with the things around us and the conflicts that come, is distract us from what our calling is. Yeah. You know, and get us off the wall.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I feel like that's the case. And, you know, I don't know what the next seasons might be. I know I tell people now, like, hey, you put yourself in a season, you're in a season, and it almost sounds like it may end. And, you know, I always say now, I'm like, well, I'm in a perpetual season of peace, because that's my prayer.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, other seasons may cross over, but I certainly don't want to lose a season of peace.
So good. Oh, that's so wise. Well, I'm looking forward to your book when you write that. So talk a little bit about what you're involved in now and how you see this opportunity impacting the next generation of leaders in our communities.
Yeah, so I've read a lot of different studies, just so you know, on different things involving leadership, specifically in leadership in government, all forms of government. And while that too gets a lot of negative publicity these days, it's a necessary function. Our safety, our social economics, you know, communities, all that rely on government. And so understanding how government leadership turns in and forms really is an interesting sort of study to dive into. And in my sort of research, quote unquote, I will tell you that there's sort of this learning curve of generational mindsets. And we're right in the middle of this pinch where you have sort of this old mindset of leadership and this new mindset of leadership, and they're kind of meeting in the middle, right? You have maybe a boss who did things a certain way for years, and now you have I don't want to say younger, but let's say newer employees who are trying to do it a different way, and who's right and who's wrong. And so there's this convergence. And then you have sort of this middle manager who's like, well, I see why they do it that way. That's worked, but I also understand adopting a new idea. And so we'll try. And so there's this convergence that's going on. But as every year that goes by, that convergence shifts up, and eventually all the newer mindsets will be in, right? And this is a continual circle. And then so looking at that, I've always said, like, where can you have the most impact? Where can you have the most? If you're going to teach, educate, train, do whatever in that learning field, like who is your target audience, and are they going to be impactful in some kind of way? Otherwise, why are you doing it? Right.
Right.
Where's the service in it? And so teaching is a ministry of service, I believe, too. And just other happy, funny story. Like I chance had the opportunity a number of years ago to advance my education. Wasn't really even sure why I was trying to get advanced degrees. Got it just because of cost reimbursement opportunities that favored themselves. Certainly wasn't my own mindset. Went through it and attended at a Christ-centered university, and was able to quote scripture in every paper I wrote and challenge sort of the common thinking. And of course, I was coming at it, decades later than a lot of the students that were attending class. So I had a different perspective as a older, more senior student in the school.
Seasoned student.
But it turned out it's like, oh, boom, here's a teaching opportunity. And oh, by the way, do you have an advanced degree? And I'm like, well, I do. And so I just literally rolled into this teaching opportunity. And the University of Mobile and University of West Florida were some of the first schools that really opened up a door to, hey, we want to change the curriculum. We want to change the way we're teaching this.
And the curriculum is in
the different subjects, but mostly dealing in law enforcement, government, political science a little bit, but criminology at the University of Mobile, and dabbling now my foot slightly in cybersecurity. But how do we change the next generation of leader and get them to see how they can be in a positive impact, a positive change agent on the world?
Wow.
The world needs some changing.
That's right.
And the world needs positive influence. The world needs Christ-centered people. The University of Mobile is a Christ-centered university. As a matter of fact, when we write our curriculum, like I have to talk about how the methodology that I'm using is focused around God, and I so enjoy that. Like that's my favorite part of writing the syllabus each year, right? Is because in a lot of other places that's either not spoken or not really pushed, or it's shamed in some regard. And in this big struggle of church and state, I always say like, well, okay, well you keep the state, I'll take the church. But I was reminded in a political science class just recently too. Going back to the very first paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. And the very last paragraph of the Declaration of Independence, our founding fathers actually used God as the center for the conversation, actually wrote it into the document. And while people think about 1776 as the year of the Declaration of Independence and separating from something, actually, if you read the document, it's an allegiance to stand together for God to make the community safer so people will have their rights.
Wow.
And that's a powerful statement, no matter where you stand politically. That's the center of your ability to do it freely. And God's in the center of it. It's written in the document. I encourage people to go look at that. It's written in there. And to be able to teach classes that come from something that's centered on God at the very beginning is so interesting. But how do you make, I know Pastor Colleen's always talking about world changers. How do you teach world changers how to change the world? It starts in education. And I believe that is overlooked and an opportunity missed if you don't seize that as a ministry. To go in there, to pray for students. I've had students after class have issues, whatever, and I'm like, well, we can pray. Like do things like that are uncommon. And then find out, so people ask like, what subjects do you teach? And I'm always trying to pursue new subjects because my thing is I need to be comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's going to create me to want to learn. That's going to challenge me to find new opportunities. And by the way, being comfortable in the uncomfortable, that transposes into your regular life. And when you seek seasons of peace and you seek things like that, being able to go through uncomfortable seasons, knowing that you can get comfortable there because you have Christ in the center of it, like that's, it just takes away, it literally, like if you imagine falling off a roller coaster and your stomach going, like it takes that stomach out of it and you're just very calm in the situation. Now, don't be reckless, make smart choices,
right?
But use those opportunities of challenge to really find your center back there. And that's what, for me, teaching is. I love it. I don't know in seasons ahead, like, is that everything? I know I certainly have long-term opportunities there. I've got other opportunities that are showing up on the horizon. So I'm in prayer for where do I go next? If it turns out to be I stay there or I go somewhere else and that becomes another dream job, well, then that's just a third or fourth blessing because I've had several. If not, it really doesn't matter because I've had a dream life. And I feel like God in the center of it, all the blessings, even all the storms, look where I am now.
Yeah.
And wouldn't trade it for the world.
That's right.
And if somebody said, well, you have to go through all of these steps to wind up right back here, then put me in, coach, because I want to wind up right back here.
That's so good, Kevin. That's so encouraging. you're currently leading a men's Bible study, which you do on a regular basis. Most every time we have small group seasons here at Coastal, or anytime, you're really in a perpetual Bible study because you have a lot of men that you lead and you mentor and that are just friends of yours, that you just have a good core group that you have, and these Bible studies that you lead. What has leading like a men's group meant to your Christian journey? And then how would you encourage others, like, do this, like get in a group or lead a group? Like, tell us about that.
I think a lot of times when you walk in faith, you equate like really good things with miracles, and miracles are great things. And so you start looking for these miracles. Mm-hmm. I think the thing that the small group does is it gives you a slightly different perspective. While miracles happen and you see them, being present and watching another man find freedom,
wow,
it's an undescribable experience. And you learn from it and you see it. And I've seen that happen so many times because we created it, and it's not me. Like I'm happy to handle the administrative piece of it. I now, this small group, I have two other partners that help with that. But like, even if it was just me or was anyone else, like, I don't mind setting up the opportunity because I want to create the invitation. And I think we need to see who attends. And there's been several times where we've had our own little, retreat. We'll go hike on a mountain, or we'll go someplace, and to watch guys that won't find freedom anywhere else, find freedom there is unreal. One of the things that I've found is there's a very close walk, synonymously almost, with maybe a man or men who might be struggling with some sort of trauma and healing issue, right? And so, originally we started the group, we were like sort of seeking people that may have had some story and they're trying to find healing. And then in walks some of the greatest blessings in our life and in my life, some of my closest friends, but people who have walked through some stronghold or addiction. And what you find out is a lot of the behavior is the same. A lot of the triggers are the same. And so when you bring all of them into the same group and you say, hey, it doesn't matter what got you here, here's where we are. This is how we find our way out. To see how they can find freedom together is one of the most remarkable things, that totally unexpected. But we see it every week. And it's not me leading a group. It's me attending a group that I might have orchestrated. This season and this semester, we're at my house. And I've had people, say, hey, well, thank you for opening your doors, or thank you for letting us come to the house. And the only thing I can say in response to that, and I believe this to my core, is why we built this place. Like that's what my house is for, is it not?
Yeah.
Aren't churches supposed to thrive outside of the church too, in homes?
Yes.
And I want to come under the authority of the church. I want to stay true to what it is that we intend these semesters of small groups to be. But at the same time, I want to give this freedom for people to find their own freedom. And yeah, we've had some where we've had repeat attendees, and in this semester I've got some new gentlemen, actually mostly new gentlemen in this group, and I'm already forging great friendships with all of them, and just to see how God's working in other people, and to hear people say things and be like, well, yeah, I've kind of gone through that too. Wow. And to be able to share that, or them to ask, and so as a leader, you mentor. I encourage everybody to do it because it gives you an opportunity to mentor, but then you can be mentored through God's passion, His love, His grace, His mercy, His experiences, just by listening to what other men in the group tell you. And if you're a lady, then maybe it's ladies in your group, or a co-mix. For me, it's men's Bible study groups. Yeah. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. Sign me up for the next semester. I don't know what that looks like. I can just tell you I have some great friends who are also members of this church who have come alongside and agreed to host, and this has been confirmed in so many different ways. Yeah. That this is where God wants us, and if it's on our heart to do it again, we'll continue. I'm available. Yeah. I'm going to make myself available. That's let's just see what God's got in store.
So good. Okay. Well, I appreciate everything that you have shared with us today. It has just been so good. But we come to our fun last question, which may not be like fun, but it's a question. What is one of your current favorite things that you think needs to be everyone's favorite thing? Now, we ask this at the end of every podcast, and we tell them it can be a book, a podcast, a restaurant, a food, whatever. But you had two things maybe. right?
Well, I'm conflicted because
Okay.
I can certainly give you a book.
Okay, let's give a book first.
Okay, so
Everybody loves a good book.
Yeah, so one of the books that really ties into what we talked about today is The Body Keeps the Score.
Yep.
And I recommend it if anybody's ever thought even about just reading how to deal. And the summary of the whole thing is this: you may see things, hear things, and experience things, but until you understand how to deal with those things, good, bad, or indifferent, and that you're already equipped with the necessary tools to deal it, you're just going to be fighting harder. And the quicker you want to get to peace, this will get you a pathway there. So that's a good good read.
The Body Keeps the Score. And we can't say the author's last name because it's difficult, but we'll put it in the show notes.
It's like a 5-worded name.
It's like, I don't know.
But so I recommend that for, related to what we talked about today. Secondly, I would just say I have kind of this kind of unique off the wall challenge, and I almost challenge anybody to try this to make it their favorite thing. And that is, if you find yourself in a really challenging situation, mainly inconvenience, we find inconveniences every day. Stop in that inconvenient moment, and instead of thinking about what you shouldn't say and maybe even saying it, thank God for just a minute. Because if you put God in the center of the most inconvenient moments of your day, think about how easy it will be to put him in the great moments of your day. And it'll keep you focused too. And here's the other thing too: when you put God in the center of your inconvenience, it'll remind you how small you are in the big picture, even though you may think you're big. And I just say it this way. I was like, God may not have caused the inconvenience, but you can stop for a minute and just say, thank you, God, for this inconvenience, and remind yourself of why you are. And if somebody needs to get in front of you, then they obviously need to get where they're going just a little bit quicker. And I'm okay with that. Because if you're going to stay in a season of peace, I'm not trying to rush through it. That's where I would say. So my favorite thing right now would be to challenge people.
If I'm inconvenienced, if I'm sitting in traffic on 64.
Take a second and just thank God for the inconvenience.
Just take a second. Thank you.
Yeah.
Lord, and this is what we always say in our house, like, God, you must be keeping me from a wreck.
100%.
Because you order my steps. And so you're keeping me from something. You're saving me from something. So I'm just going to sit here and thank you.
Yes. It's a good reminder, and that's a great challenge.
Yeah, that is a good challenge and a good reminder. Well, thank you, Kevin, for being here today on Coastal Conversations. I know that this episode is going to help so many people. It's already helped me and breathed life into me and just been an encouragement. So thank you so much. Thank you for your service to our country. Thank you for your service here locally. Thank you for extending that to the future generations. Thank you for being a group leader and everything that you mean to all of us. We appreciate your friendship and what you mean to Coastal Church. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you.
Before we go today, I just wanted to remind you that Easter is coming soon here at Coastal and, well, all over, but Easter especially is coming to Coastal Church. And I wanted to give you a few reminders. So on Friday, April the 18th at 6 p.m., we have our Easter egg hunts. Now, at Daphne, it begins at 6 o'clock and we have 100,000 Easter eggs. It is a plethora of eggs. You know that one of our values here at Coastal is more than enough. So there are going to be more than enough eggs for you and all your friends ages 0 through 12. And all of those ages, all of those hunts will be split into age-appropriate egg hunts. So you don't have to worry about your 1-year-old hunting with a 12-year-old. It's all split up into age-appropriate hunts, and it is so much fun. That happens April the 18th at 6 p.m. On that same night, April the 18th at 6 p.m., over at our Bay Minette campus, we're going to have our Blacklight Easter egg hunt. Now, that's same ages, and it's in their large auditorium, and it's all blacklit, and all of the eggs glow, and it's so much fun. It's just a different way to hunt eggs. All the kids love it. Thousands and thousands of eggs for the kids to go crazy over. So if you're closer to Bay Minette, you'll want to go to the Bay Minette campus at 6 p.m. If you're over here near the Daphne area, you can visit our Daphne campus at 6 p.m. on April the 18th. Then on Sunday, April the 20th, Easter Sunday morning. Now, listen up if you go to the Daphne campus. If you attend our Daphne campus, we have some special service times just for Easter. So those service times are 8 a.m., 9:30 a.m., and 11 a.m. So that's again 8 a.m., 9:30 a.m., or 11 a.m. You can choose from 3 service times on Easter. You can sit inside or outside or in our cafe. All the venues will be open. We'll also be online, but I know you'll want to be here in person for our special Easter service. And then at the Bay Minette campus on Easter, April the 20th, our service times are 9:30 and 11 a.m. Again, Coastal Kids and Coastal Kids Junior, the nurseries, all are open during every single service time. So your kids will be taken care of. They will get a beautiful Easter service. It is going to be such an impactful weekend. You don't want to miss it. Start getting those Easter outfits ready to go. We're going to have picture opportunities for you and your family. It's just going to be a great, great weekend. We look forward to seeing you on Easter Sunday here at Coastal Church. Well, thanks for tuning in this week. We will be back next week on Wednesday with a brand new episode. Thank you for listening to this week's Coastal Conversations podcast. All of today's references will be found in the show notes. Also, if you enjoyed listening, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. We'll see you at Coastal this Sunday as we pick the conversation up from here.